This is the Recivilized podcast with your host, Chris Foehrkolb. On the podcast, I talk with bright and sensible people about how we can create a better way of life. This session of the Recivilized podcast features Joe Foehrkolb, a former airborne soldier in the U.S. Army who served in the Old Guard. On it, he talks about how young men today are initiated into manhood through the military. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Well, the theme of our podcast is male initiation. So I wanted to give a short introduction to the listeners about what exactly is male initiation. And it's basically a process through which boys learn what it is to be a man, and they prove themselves to be one. It's been happening for 50,000 years. Tribes take the young men, usually like 13, 14. They take them out of the woman's part of the village and they put them in a situation where they have to confront fear and danger. They have to endure pain and hardship. And there's a spiritual component as well. Now, through these trials, the boys prove themselves and other tribes that they can function as men. And today, tribes still do that. For example, there's a rainforest tribe that, as part of this initiation, they take stinging ants and they make like grass gloves and they stick the stinging ants in the gloves. And apparently it's excruciating to get stung by one of these ants. They're called bullet ants. And, you know, they put the gloves on these young men. They're like, all right, man, we got you. Do your thing. And it's like this tremendous ordeal of pain. But they come through it. So that leads me into my first question for you. You're an airborne infantry.
That's right.
When they gave you your wings, did they pound them into your chest?
You know, Chris, it's a funny story because Fort Benning, Georgia Airborne School, it's a 3-week airborne class, and it has not only Army people there. They have Marines, they have Air Force, they have Navy. They even have ROTC cadets go through this class. And so when you go through the course and you graduate, they make it very clear that the people that are there to support you during the graduation are not allowed to pound the wings into your chest as blood wings. The Army says this because two reasons is, first of all, it's not politically correct. You know, you can't just physically in front of everybody just make somebody bleed. It just really isn't going to go over well in the old political correctness atmosphere. But it's definitely not the case when it comes to the basic training or stuff like that. And the funny story about that is when you get promoted, like when I was promoted to an E5, and you get put in front of your old company when you get, promoted, and then they pound it in, and it's on the lapels. There's, they call them dammits that go in the back of them. I don't know how they got the name dammit, but you lose them a lot. That's probably where they got the name from. They go in the back of those those two prongs at the end of those ranks, but they don't give you the dammits when they put it on your lapels. And so the CO will put your new rank on your lapels, and he'll put his palms onto the rank, and he'll push them in. And you say congratulations, and you salute, and you move on. And then everybody gets a turn of the whole company to say congratulations on your promotion. Nice ones won't pull them out to make new holes in your skin. The nice ones won't do that. They'll just pound them. Congratulations, pound them. But some, when you get to the E6s, E7s, they pull them out, find your collarbone, clavicle, and then they'll pound them into your bone. After 2 or 3 of those times, you kind of lose sense of feeling, and then you just go with it. There's really nothing else you can do about it. It's not like you can break being at a position of attention anyway.
That is great. That is great to hear. I was about to be very disappointed. What? No one pounds your rank into your chest until you bleed? That's terrible. That's barbaric. We need to bring back the old ways.
It's exactly what you say. It's a rite of passage.
Yes. So the answer, did you get blood wings, is Kinda.
Kind of.
Which I fully approve of.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And so now the question is, why is initiation important? And again, just as an introduction to the listeners, the consensus is that women are born, but men are made. Women are valuable for just what they are. They're about being. They bear children. That's an amazing capability, and they come with that. I mean,
That's right.
it's part of the package. And of course, there's a clear biological marker that comes with that. When a girl hits, 12, 13, it's like, oh, I can have babies now. So again, they're about being. If you want to please a woman, you say, you're beautiful. It's what you are. Oh, of course I am. I am this thing. Now, men, so it works a little differently. Men are valuable for what they can do. They're not about being. They're about doing. They're supposed to create and destroy. And that capacity has to be taught and proven. So you want to please a man, you don't say you are something, you say you did something. Hey man, you killed that buffalo. Mm-hmm. And the man goes, yep, darn right I did. And that for a man that's the praise they want. You did the thing. Good job. So without a process to harness that power, that creative and destructive power, you get trouble. Left to their own devices, boys form street gangs and private equity firms. If they're sheltered by their mothers into their teens, they become addicts of like video and porn and weed, and they become neats, like no education, employment, or training. They're nowhere. So that, in my opinion, is why initiation is important. If you don't do it for young men, they run off the rails real quick. My question for you is, have you seen this in our society?
In our society, when we're talking about initiations, there's few between what we would call initiations anymore. Things have changed drastically in the last 20 years. The family dynamic itself has been under attack for a long time. Women, yes, they can bear children, but it's not a requirement. It's something they're able to do. If all women were forced into, having babies, we wouldn't have nuns. So there's that. But and I have 3 daughters, so it's close to my heart, and that's why I kind of preface with the times that we're living in now, where the gentlemanly kind of attribute that most males should have, and that's something that they kind of learn and when they're becoming men. Now it's at a time where you almost have to ask if you can open a door for a female. My wife expects it. I know my wife, and she knows me, so there's a little bit different there. But those things that boys go through, it kind of has gone away. Where when we grew up, when you turn 18, you leave the house. Whatever that separation is from what you've known to what you don't know, the great beyond, not a lot of boys are going through there. I have, like I said, I have 3 daughters, and a couple of them have boyfriends, and some of their friends, I mean, they play video games. They have no intention of really doing much with their life. They have no idea what they're doing in life, and these are 17-year-olds, and really you're not supposed to know what you're supposed to do in life yet. That's why you're supposed to get out and go enjoy it. That's part of initiation, is getting away from how you grew up with whatever family dynamic you had. That coupled with a lot of boys and girls, a lot of kids are growing up with only one parent. So you're only going to get one side of the story. You're not going to get both sides. You're not going to get a male point of view and a female point of view. And it doesn't matter the gender that the kid is. You got to have 2 points of views, or else you kind of start getting into trouble. So when you separation comes in many forms. For me, when I left home, I was the youngest. I was a black sheep, and I really didn't believe in what the youngest black sheep kind of thing was until I have 3 daughters and know my youngest daughter. And I realize what a black sheep is now. But when you leave, you're separated from home. You're forced into learning something new. You're forced into seeing what you're capable of. And through those things, through that separation, through what you're learning in just daily life, daily challenges, those are the things that's really going to change your mindset and how to grow up, because you're not dependent on anybody else. That is the big question of being dependent on somebody else. Can I just go home and say, hey, Mom, can you do my laundry for me? Hey, Mom, can you make me dinner? I got nothing. No, make yourself some ramen. When you grow up, you got to learn that kind of thing, or else you'll starve. Those are the things that don't go away. So you have to separate yourself. That's step one. That is step one easily.
Well, that leads me into my big question for you is, what form did that take for you? You went off to the military, so take it from there.
All right. Well, even before the military, when I left home at 18 years old, and I tried to do community college, and I was just getting out of school, for crying out loud. I didn't want to go right back. No kid wants to go back to school, for crying out loud. You spend 12 years in that place. You want to do something else. So I moved to Montana, found a job in a guest ranch in Big Sky, Montana. And I got this job. It was when internet was still new. That this is 1999 we're talking about. I mean, you're dialing up to get onto the internet. So I was just looking to see what was around. So I was throwing applications everywhere: Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. And I got one call back, and it was to be a kids coordinator for kids programs at a guest ranch. So when families come for a week, parents can drop their kids off. You play games with them. You take them canoeing, you go camping, you kind of rock climb, archery, all that kind of stuff that you would think of like a summer vacation or a summer camp. That's kind of what I did. Wonderful. First time in Montana too. And I come from Illinois is where I grew up. And so when I went to Montana, it was a fish out of water. But I knew I didn't want to stay at home. I knew I had to get the heck out, because even though my family dynamic had mother and father, even that sometimes doesn't work for you. You're not going to get what you need out of that, so you have to kind of just roll out. And so I was there back and forth for 4 years. Worked up, was a chef in the restaurant, kind of working my way around, and then wound up being a maintenance groundskeeper, mowing grass, things like that, working on trails. Off season, we were building cross-country ski trails up in 10,000 foot altitude, driving a big 1956 Chevy dump truck up in the very, very, very tight angles up in those mountains with a big old chipper in the back. That is where I learned how to grow up real freaking quick, because nobody was buying groceries for me. Nobody was going to the grocery store for me. I mean, once a week we had to drive 45 minutes to get to Bozeman just to go to a grocery store. And of course, I didn't know what to buy. What the heck was I going to do? So I bought a loaf of bread and a block of cheese. That was my lunch and dinner for 3 months in the off season. That was it. Learned real quick how to shop too, and cook. That's why. So I learned quickly after 3 or 4 years of doing that it was going to be really hard to do anything in life on $9 an hour. And I was like, what's going to happen? And it just so happened my grandfather died around that time, and I had to go back for the funeral. I didn't have a suit. I had freaking Carhartts and boots. That's what I had. I didn't have a suit. So I went back home. My father bought a suit for me so I can go to the funeral, and I was a pallbearer for my grandfather, and he had an American flag. He was a World War II vet. And, I got there, and I was like, I don't think I can go back to Montana. I don't know what to do. And so it was 2 years after 9/11, and I remember I was talking to my brother out on a bonfire with my grandpa's house after he died, and we were talking. I was like, yeah, man, I mean, if you don't go, I'll go. And my brother already had a daughter, and I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll go, because you got a kid, and you need to take care of that kid. And so that, coupled with talking to one of my other buddies, he said he was going to join the Navy. So he wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And I was like, well, I grew up, hunting and being outdoors and, surviving, and then spent so much time backpacking in Montana for days on end. And I was like, it kind of fits. Why don't we go see what we can do over there? So we went to the Navy recruiter, and they were saying, well, you join the Navy, and then you get through basic, and then you get to your job and all that. Then you can request transfer to go through buds, and then maybe if you're selected, then you could be a Navy SEAL. And I was like, it's an awful lot of work, not even knowing if you're going to get what your ultimate goal was. And the recruiting station there in Collinsville, Illinois was, well, we were lucky. We had a Navy recruiter on one side of the building and an Army recruiter on the other. And so when we heard that, my battle buddy and I walked across, and I told my buddy, I was like, you ever heard of the Army Rangers? And he's like, yeah, I heard of them. And so we walked over, talked to the Army recruiter, who was infantry, blue cord, all that stuff. It was like, my first question was, can you sign up to be a Ranger right now? And he's like, oh, hell yeah. I don't really get that question that much. Let's do an ASVAB test real quick. So we did it. I think I scored a 95, and at that time, that was a pretty high percentile. So I was basically able to choose what I wanted, but I already had my mind set. So I was able to get a Ranger contract. So it was, how the contract worked was, you spend 15 weeks in infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia. You go directly to 3 weeks of airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia. Then you go to 3 weeks of Ranger indoctrination process, which is 3 weeks of hell. And then you go directly into Ranger school. Then you're in the Ranger battalion. So I was like, sign me up. Let's do it. And so ship out date wasn't until 6 or 7 months after that. So I had time to kind of get mentally and physically prepared. During that time, my battle buddy was like, nah, never mind. I don't want to go. And so I still went. And then we went to 30th AG, which is where at Fort Benning, Georgia, is kind of like the processing place. So week-long processing. And so get on a plane, get off at Columbus, Georgia. Very nice drill sergeants picked you up at the airport. Very cordial. Hey, bro. Hey, man. You're like, hey, what the heck? Nobody's yelling. So got on a bus, showed up at Fort Benning, Georgia, went to 30th AG, and there was this big open bay with just seats and a barber shop all over in another room. And there were bench seats. They didn't have backs on them, of course. Why would it be comfortable? But we go in there, and we just, one of the drill sergeants there just said, hey, just sit tight. Somebody will be with you in a minute. Waited there for 45 minutes. Nothing. All of a sudden, somebody came in, looked around, and was like, y'all need to shave, and our water doesn't work. So go ahead to the bathrooms and dry shave, and then we'll get you lined up and shave your head. So this whole progression on that first hour was like, this is so uncoordinated. You know, this logistically, this just doesn't work. Of course, I was, at the time, I was a little bit older. I was 23 when I joined the Army. And so I was just like, this is a trick. Something doesn't seem right. And so did the whole thing, got our head shaved, and then we sat back down, and then we had to line up. And this was like at 7 p.m. And then we lined up to start getting our uniform draw. And it was a practice of standing and waiting in line, standing and waiting in line. So we waited in line for, I probably stayed in line for about 2.5 hours. And I got a white shirt. Waited in the line for 2.5 hours for a white shirt. Waited another line, then I got my BDUs, top, with no name. And then waited another line for 2.5 hours, got the pants. And then, lo and behold, the next day, you finally got all your equipment draw. Then they showed us the bunks, and we slept. And the next day, it was breakfast chow. We didn't eat anything that night, but breakfast chow came, and it was like scrambled eggs, it was bacon, it was hash browns, it was waffles, pancakes, anything you would ever want. And I was like, this cannot be right. This just seems wrong. So more waiting in line. So you had to do ear tests, eye tests. This is a week-long process of getting all your gear, getting all your wills signed up, just doing some PT in the morning. And they were feeding you hamburgers, pizzas, as much as you can eat. Just hanging out, standing in line, getting fat. And I was like, okay, I got what's going on now. They're fattening us up, and then they're going to rip into us like a fat pig waiting to be on a spit. Sure enough, that's what happened. It was downrange day. They loaded us up. They put us all in our sticks and fire lines, and we started marching. And the screams began Of course, they stood everybody up. They said, "Infantry, follow me." Everybody yelled out, "Infantry, follow me!" And it was never loud enough until my ears were hurting how loud everybody was screaming. And then all of a sudden, your senior drill instructor pulled out your platoon. You started marching because we had a week of learning how to march. That was basically all we did, other than getting uniform drill. So we started walking. It was probably a mile and a half to where the barracks were. Started walking down Fort Benning, Georgia, Sand Hill, horrible place. Drill sergeant looks to the left and says, "That is administration building. If you get caught there without me knowing, I will kick you out of the Army." Then we keep walking. Over to your right is the doctor's office. "If you were there without me knowing, I'll kick you out of the Army." Of course, I'm talking. He's screaming. And then we get to the PT pit of where our barracks were. Now, this was the beginning of Hell Week. This was the time where they rough out the edges, get the bad and good habits down to where you have no habits. The PT pit is interesting. So when you first get there, you got all these trucks that come up. That's where all your gear is. You had to throw your duffel bags and assault packs and stuff and that are loaded up, put them in the truck while we were marching. Trucks were already there when we showed up. They just dumped everything in a pile in the PT pit. And so the objective was find your 2 bags, get in line in alphabetical order with your duffel bag on the ground first and the holes facing north and your assault pack on top. It took 4 hours to get that right. And every time we didn't get it right, we had to duck walk around the whole PT pit and then try again.
Duck walk. What is duck walk?
So duck walk, if you squat down and put your hands behind your head, and then you have to walk without standing up. So it's real low profile, and then when they say jump, you jump. And doing that for probably 300 yards is around the pit, and that was one time. And yeah, 4 hours of that. So we were smoked, but that was the objective. It was an understanding that you no longer were in control.
So smoked, Army term for put you into serious physical pain.
That's right. That's right. And they always said when you were smoked, they knew this scientifically from doctors that your muscles take 75 seconds to get ready for the next round. So you got 75-second break between smoke sessions, which is nice. Of course, their biggest feat was I'm going to smoke you until your dog tags float, which meant if you're on asphalt or something like that, your pool of sweat would make your dog tags float. Those are good smoke sessions.
I like that. So what you just described to me seems like good old school initiation.
That's right.
The first thing they did was they separated you from the world that you knew in a physical way. They took all your hair off. Mm-hmm. Like, look, hey, man, you are no longer in the civilian world. You're not going to need that hair. In fact, you know what? Not only are you not going to need it, it's better you don't have it because, if you're out in the field and there's all sorts of ticks and bugs and whatnot, you don't want it. They don't want them, nesting in your hair.
That's true. And you all looked the same. You were a number. You were not a name.
But hold on. I thought our society was all about everybody being themselves and being an individual.
That's the funny thing about all military is you have to count on the people that's on your left or right, or else you're dead. So there shouldn't be individualism in the military. It doesn't function correctly. Officers can be, sure, not enlisted.
I would even say, because, I was an officer. I was in the reserves, and I would even say that's a bad idea for officers as well. You've got to, like you said, you've got to have commonality of values, a commonality of purpose. You've got to all be focused towards the same mission.
That's true.
And we're both Catholics, mm-hmm. and the Catholic faith has a lot to do with sacrifice. What you're doing is you are sacrificing your freedom of expression, your freedom of action to further the goals of the group.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're only as good as the last one that passes the finish line of a 12-mile ruck march.
Yeah, good point. So getting people into thinking that, look, you're part of it. You're no longer just you. You're part of a tribe, and this tribe has a very specific purpose. As David Hackworth said, he was our best battalion commander of Vietnam. He said, "Yeah, that purpose is very simple: kill the enemy, take ground."
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
There you go.
That mission for that war.
Yep.
Didn't work that way, though.
Yeah.
It wound up being a body count situation.
God, yeah. Read his book. He wrote like an 800-page book called About Face, where he describes that.
Oh, wow.
Describes his experience. He also describes his boot camp experience, which is very similar to yours.
I'm sure.
By the way, what year did you go through boot camp down at Benning?
It was 2003. Yeah.
Okay.
It was
All right.
before the red cards.
What are red cards?
Well, I don't know if it's like that in Fort Benning for infantry school. So infantry school at Fort Benning is 15 weeks. It's not 9-week program like other MOSs. 11 Bravos, they go through 15 weeks. And their AIT is combined with their basic training because an infantry soldier has to learn from day one certain things that affect the last day of graduation. It's a continuous 15-week program for a certain reason. But yeah, I was recruited after 30th AG, and I forgot to mention this. The last day of 30th AG, because I was over 6 foot tall with the GT score, which I guess I don't even know what the heck that means, but it's the ASVAB test and things like that has a GT score of 110 or more. Then you can be recruited into the Honor Guard, which is the oldest active infantry regiment. It's the original, actually. Alpha Company was where I was stationed, and Alpha Company is the Commander-in-Chief's Guard. So they were an actual unit that George Washington himself wanted for his own personal guards. And so that was our company. So our original orders was from George Washington. And that actually took me out of the running for Rangers to go. And so that's why I didn't actually become a Ranger, was because I got recruited into this thing in Washington, D.C. And, you know, they're the ones that bury people in Arlington National Cemetery. It's a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. They do the presidential cordons, funerals, and a lot of missions when they bring forward dignitaries over to scare the hell out of them. So that's kind of was my mission that I thought was kind of, that was kind of interesting. I never heard of it before. Obviously, I saw it on TV. I was like, going to have an opportunity like that. I couldn't really pass that up. I hated to change my contract to get rid of the Ranger program, but one thing I stipulated was I still want to go to airborne school very much. And so I was still able to go get wings and not be a leg, which is nice.
So, in terms of initiation, did airborne school fill the bill?
Airborne school was funny because I went, so with 15 weeks of basic training, that was where the initiation started. And I felt initiated at the end. When you turn blue for infantry, what that means is you get your blue cord, and that signifies you as an infantry soldier. On the graduation grounds, I'll never forget it. I had family there at the graduation. They went all the way to Georgia, and they got to see me for all of 10 minutes after graduation until the buses came around with a megaphone. Anybody going to airborne school, load up. And I went directly into airborne school. From there, got on the bus, did the whole registration and paperwork and all that stuff over there. Then I was able to have the weekend, and this was my first weekend off in 15 weeks. And so I was feeling pretty good having that weekend. Family stuck around, was able to hang out. It was great. Actually able to have a beer again, and it tasted like crap. Like literally it tasted horrible, and I didn't know what that was. But the whole process through with the initiation part is the idea behind what the Army wants to do during basic training is to just flush off everything that you would ever have with you, any habit, bad habit, good habit, how you talk. They wanted you to feel like you had the easiest job in the world, and that was not ever making any decision because they were going to make it for you. That was the idea. get everything down to bare bones, that bare piece of meat, strip down all those habits until you're left with just a workable substance. That was their goal. So they can work and start molding in the way that they felt benefited the Army and the infantry. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what it was. It's the easiest part of a recruit. Easiest part is whenever you start to accept it and start to realize that there's a reason for all this and I don't know what it is yet. It's just something you got to grin and bear. And grinning and bearing it, that is part of that stripped down purpose too, is you just got to go through hell sometimes. And if you're there on the other end, you take what you learn and you learn from it and you move on and you grow from it. And that's the whole idea behind it.
Mm. Well, it sounds like your experience in the Army definitely, it was congruent with what I understand to be traditional initiation rituals. You separate the boy from his mother, from what's familiar. You take him into the wilderness, take him someplace new, and you subject him to trials of pain, trials of endurance, and at some point, if he does what he's supposed to do, if he proves himself to be competent, confident, able to be an integral part of that tribe, he's accepted into the tribe in a very overt kind of way, through a parade, a ceremony of some sort. Mm-hmm. What was that ceremony like for you?
It was after FTX, field training exercise. It's the last thing you have to do in order to pass infantry school and be an official turning blue, 11 Bravo. It is a 3-day process, 72 hours straight. That's when you apply everything that you've learned through basic training, rappelling, shooting, high stress tactics, cover concealment, camouflage, estimating range. It's just the whole gamut of what you've learned in those 15 weeks. And it's 72 hours straight. And then, of course, they have little practicals along the way, but you don't sleep. You have fire holes, you dig foxholes, you stay up, you have fire call, you have fire watch. And at Sand Hill, it was basic training started in January for me. I didn't know it got that cold in Georgia, for crying out loud. But toward the end, it was April, and in the sand in a foxhole, I remember shaving on my knee in the middle of the night, and a copperhead just wiggled its way right through my legs, and I just saw the tail. It was going by, and I realized I didn't jump or anything. I just turned around, and I saw it. I was like, huh, interesting. And just moved on.
I had that same experience. I was out in the field for a week at Fort Bragg, and by the end of that week, I felt like I was just part of the furniture. I was just another animal, crawling around in that forest.
Just another number.
Yeah. And then I get back to civilization, and there's running water, and there are electric lights, and I'm amazed. I'm just saying to myself, this is a whole new world.
Yeah, look what I just got through.
Exactly. Well, that, and also the fact that I had immersed myself in that world of the field, as they say in the military. And I mean, you're immersed in it for a week, mm-hmm. and gives you a different perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like you just described. Oh, there's a snake. Okay.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
He does his thing. I'll do mine. So at the end of this, the end of it was a 12-mile ruck march. That was the end of it. Of course, we had been up for so long. At 12-mile ruck march, you're supposed to, really supposed to do it in 3 hours, but that's not going to happen after 72 hours being awake. But it was midnight when it ended, and it was where we landed was in the middle of the woods, and we saw a big bonfire, and they had warrior juice is what they said. Everybody's going to be drinking from warrior juice. Of course, it was just a bunch of different red dyes and Gatorade and crap like that. They just said, well, it's warrior pee. That's what they tell you. But it was the bonfire. They had everybody in a circle, and they passed around the big chalice of warrior soup or warrior tea, or whatever they called it. And it was just the Gatorade stuff. But that was the official ending ceremony that nobody sees. And that was when you felt that you can finally put your shoulders down and say, I've done something. The drill sergeants didn't do it for me. It's something that I did and that I can carry that confidence. That is the important thing. Carry that confidence forward.
Excellent. Excellent. I think every single young man in the country should have a similar experience.
I agree. I'm remiss if I don't say this, but I feel it should be a mandatory that with people coming out of high school, it should be a mandatory enlistment for 2 years. Israel does it. Women and men should be doing that because nobody really knows what they want to go to college for, so they're just crapping away money. Oh, I'm just going to get my general education stuff, and then I'll figure out my cornerstone classes after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not really going to know until you get out and really start finding out who you are, looking in the mirror a lot more. And if you had that 2 years of mandatory active duty, you have school paid for you, and you already have the drive and the understanding of what motivation you require in order to get through that hell of college. And you're not $120,000 in debt afterwards. Then all you're doing is playing catch up. It's unfair.
I like it. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
So one of the things about a true initiation is it always includes a spiritual component. Did your experience at boot camp include any sort of spiritual component?
Yeah, it did. I want to say it was 2 weeks in, 2 or 3 weeks in, whenever we were at the barracks, not including 30th AG, really can't count that. But 2 or 3 weeks in, it was the first time, it was a Saturday night. And it was the first time they said, hey, if there's a church service tonight, and it's a Catholic church service. So if you're Catholic, you're able to go if you want. Of course, everybody's hand raised because everybody wanted a break. Everybody wanted to just sit down and be quiet for a little bit and not get screamed at. So because everybody raised their hand, they had to look at dog tags to make sure that people who are actually Catholic were able to go. Of course, I was able to go because like you said, I was Catholic. And when I go to Mass, it's a non-denominational chapel, and they have all the services there. And, a lot of people have seen it. And, they have the cross in front, but the stained glass was a silhouette of a soldier kneeling down with a dead body. And that was the stained glass behind the cross. And I don't really remember what the priest said at all, but I can remember feeling, I remember feeling that I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I didn't feel that the 2 weeks before, but the 2 weeks before, the 3 weeks before, I was like, what the hell did I do? But it wasn't until that service was I like, yeah, I'm here. I'm good. God's watching.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you very much for talking with me about how young men today are initiated into manhood through the military.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
This concludes another session of the Recivilized podcast. To hear more sessions with various guests, visit the Recivilized website at www.recivilized.site.